Okay, let's get started, inshallah. Bismillahi walhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Let's settle down, inshallah, so everyone could hear. Welcome. Bismillahi walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and peace be upon you all. Welcome. Thank you for bringing your heart. Let's take a moment to renew our intentions and check in with our heart. And the heart we come into any space with determines what we get out of that space. And the reverence that we have for a space also maximizes what we get out of that space, right? So the respect, the sacredness, the presence, the more you can heighten these things, these qualities, whenever you're in a learning space, the more you take away from them, inshallah. So today I'm going to talk to you about a concept in my heart over mind and ego method that I think is really important and affecting a lot of people's lives today, and that is the illusion of control. So today's topic is on conquering the illusion of control. And many people struggle with this, right? Where we have these illusions that we can control things that we don't control. We have this illusion that we can control so many things in our lives that actually are not in our control. Allah did not ask us to carry that control, right? And many times we carry what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not ask us to carry. And we burden ourselves with more than what we can bear. And this affects us spiritually, right? It affects us because it diminishes our tawakkul and the quality of our tawakkul. But it also affects us mentally, emotionally, affects us psychologically. So in psychology, we know that a sign, is it working?
Yes.
Okay. In psychology, we know that a sign of psychological health is mental flexibility, okay? And a sign of psychological struggle is mental rigidity. And I will get into that. Many people today have become rigid mentally. Things need to look a certain way for them to be happy. Things they are honing in, and this has a lot to do. They're focusing in on a lot of things they're trying to control that they can't control, and they're using their mind to do it. They're using their mind to control things that is not really in their control, and this leads to a whole set of problems and disorders that I can get into, but for the sake of time, I'm not, right? But I see this comes up in a lot of the psychological disorders that are increasing in our time. Is this quality of mental rigidity. And so the more that you can lead from the heart, the more that you can step out of this mental rigid framework that you're always trying to live by, the more that you feel ease and the more that you feel less anxiety. So rigidity is, and by the way, the nafs plays a role in this. The ego plays a role in this. Because the ego comes up and says, we need to control this and this and this and this in order for us to be happy, in order for us to be at peace, in order for us to experience, safety. And it's an illusion. And if you're led by your ego, you're going to be constantly chasing these illusions. The heart understands that Allah is ultimately in control. And the mind, and this is one of the core concepts I teach in the home method, is that the mind is a powerful tool. Don't get me wrong. The home method is not minimizing the mind, right? It's heart over mind and ego in the sense that the heart is the most powerful and sacred part within you, but not that the mind is not powerful. But the mind, despite it being a powerful tool, it's not meant to be the lead of you. I mean, anybody that studies the mind will assess that it's a miracle. It's no one but Allah could have created something like this. It is a miracle. It is powerful. It is, the more I study it, the more I'm in awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It increases our iman when we look at it, when we study it, when we explore it. And there's still, subhanAllah, things that they still have not discovered. But despite that, you're not meant to live from that space. You have a heart that can see what the mind cannot see. For example, you go through a struggle, right? And right away, you're using your mind to process the struggle, looking for a solution. So you tell your mind, think again, think. It comes back to you. 1 + 1 does not equal 2 this time. Meaning what? You can't find a rational solution to what you're going through. So the ego can bully the mind. The ego, because it is not comfortable, it is not, comfortable with the unknown. The ego is not okay with discomfort. The ego is not okay with not knowing. The ego is not okay with immediate gratification. What does it do? No, I'm not happy with the answer. Think again. It bullies the mind. So it tells the mind to keep processing. And many people go through this. Those nights that you stayed up thinking of, constantly overthinking a solution to something you didn't have a solution for? What is the solution in those moments? It's to access the heart. It's the heart to say, I accept that I don't know. It is the heart now, leading from the heart in those moments is, Ya Allah, I surrender to you. I surrender to the all-knowing. I'm meant to go through times in my life where I don't know. I am meant to go through times in my life where I am connected to this great uncertainty of what's going to happen. I'm meant to go through periods in my life where I don't know what tomorrow, well, we always don't know what tomorrow holds, but I'm meant to go through periods in my life where I'm worried about tomorrow. I'm meant to go through periods of my life where I don't know what the next step is. I don't know what the next phase is in my life. I don't know what's going to happen. And I'm meant to go through periods in my life where many periods in my life where I don't get instant gratification. I don't get instant soothing to pain and discomfort. So this is where the heart comes in. The heart understands these realities, that the mind is a processor. So the mind collects information from the world around you through your portals, which are what? Our senses. Your sight, your hearing, your sense of touch, your sense of smell, right? And so through all of that, through these senses, it's collecting information constantly. And whether you agree or not, it is obeying Allah's command, your mind. Your mind is obeying Allah's command 24/7. It is doing what it was designed to do, and that is process. So there's no turn on and turn off, right? You don't have control over that, subhanAllah. So regardless, that's why the only thing that you do have control over is what you expose your senses to and how you direct the thoughts that you have, right? To a certain degree. But Allah gives you power of, what are you going to look at? What are you going to hear? Who do you go to for advice? What do you listen to? All the things you're absorbing into the sacred world within. But the mind, when you're going through a crisis, when you're going through anything, it's just going to process what it knows. It can only process the visible. It could only process what information it has. It doesn't have access to the unseen. Regardless of what, so basically, it only has access to what the physical eye sees. But the heart has a different sight. And it can see what the mind cannot see. Not to say that we can see the unseen with our physical eyes, but it has access to these truths that Allah is working in my favor. Allah's planning for me. Allah's doing things for me that if He had lifted the veils, I would be in awe of His protection, of His wisdom, of His care for me, of His mercy. That is how you lead from the heart. And this is why we need to lead from the heart. And one of the reasons why I developed the home method is because I saw how the heart was not integrated in our psychological work in the West. Whereas Islam is centered around the heart. You have to come back to Allah with what? Qalbin salim, a sound heart, a whole heart, a heart that is complete through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Intentions are set in the heart. They may form in the mind, but they're set in the heart. And verily, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, verily your actions are by your intentions. So everything you do, the value of everything you present to Allah through your actions has everything to do with this heart. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us it's not the eyes that are blind, but the heart that is within their chests. When many times throughout the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about cognition, intellect, ability to process, the ability to understand, the ability to make conclusive conclusions, is the heart. He mentions the heart. So it is only a Western ideology that everything is fixated on the brain, especially when it comes to our psychological, our mental and emotional struggles. That's only a Western ideology. And so I saw that that was missing. And that's what led to the development of the home method, because I saw that if we don't actually access the heart, we struggle more. If we don't actually lead from the heart, we will struggle more. And we get into this place of mental rigidity, which is, like I said, a sign of psychological struggle. And this is something that the West acknowledges. The more rigid your mind becomes, the more, and this is just the inevitable result of you living from that place, the more rigid you become. And again, the ego plays a role in this because it bullies the mind. If you're led from the ego, you're going to always bully your mind. You're going to burden your mind. And this is why we have sujood, subhanAllah. Sujood is so powerful. It's so healing. It is in every at the end of every rak'ah, you put this mind in its place. You humble it in front of the all-knowing. And you remember that you're not meant to know everything. You're not meant to have every solution to every problem. You're not meant to have the answer to the next question. You're not meant to know what tomorrow holds. And that is what brings peace. It's that surrender to Allah's all-knowingness. And many people treat this mind as their Rabb. Many people treat their mind as their Rabb. They worship their mind. Whatever their mind brings back to them, I'm good. I believe it. And this is creating a lot of, OCD-related symptoms. Why? Because if you believe everything that your mind comes back to you with, that's a problem. Because every thought you have is real. It's a real experience, but not every thought you have is true. Thoughts come and go, just like emotions. Many people believe every single thought that comes to them. I've mentioned this before, but one of the signs that really solidified the home method for me was prayer. It was sujood. And it was me reflecting on the position of prayer. This was the final sign that I needed to solidify the method. And it was looking at sujood. As you humble your mind, what is higher? Your heart. It's not your heart that's on the floor. It's your brain. And it's not just any part of the brain. It's the prefrontal cortex. It's the forefront of your brain. This is the part of the brain that is the most advanced part. This is the part of the brain that's associated with many disorders, by the way. This is the part of the brain that allows you to engage in high functioning mental processes. It's what allows you to engage in abstract thinking. It's what differentiates us from animals. This is the part of the brain that causes a lot of problems. But it's powerful. It helps you in so many ways. But if you don't put it in its place, it will harm you. And that's really the essence. A lot of things Allah gave us are powerful, are beautiful, are amazing. But if you don't put them in their place, they will inevitably harm you. Just like what's haram and halal. Is everything haram, is it technically bad? No, it's like it's haram in certain times. Like food, for example, in Ramadan. If you eat all the time, even in Ramadan, when you're supposed to be fasting, doesn't food become harmful to you? Yes. So even blessings, even things like our mind, our emotions, if you don't learn to direct them and put them in their place, that could harm you. Your thoughts. Isn't it amazing to think? It's amazing, right? But if you don't put that in its place, you will struggle. So in my work, what I find is that it's really about balancing ourselves out. For example, if somebody, struggles with anger, it's not that all anger is bad, but usually people go to the extremes before they balance each other out. So somebody will be, they'll struggle with anger and they think the only way to like get rid of their anger is to go all the way to the opposite end, which is passiveness. So they become really passive. I'm not angry, never angry. and they just deny their anger, and that's not healthy too. So what is the balance? It's assertiveness, knowing how to channel your anger, knowing how to express your anger, knowing how to be firm and strong, but not aggressive and not harmful to people, right? So a lot of times our issues, it's not that they're all bad, it's that we didn't learn to balance ourselves out. And we all have areas, everyone has areas they have not yet balanced themselves out. And same thing with control. Is it bad to control things? No. But if it's not balanced, it will harm you. If you try to control everything, it will harm you. And there are many things, that we just can't control. And the ego gravitates towards extremes, by the way. The ego loves extremes. It loves when things are black and white and extreme. Think of just so many things that are happening in our world. People going to extremes on ideologies, for example. You have people who are, either feminists or the red pill movement. And Islam is in neither. It's in the middle. Islam, everything is about tawazun. But people gravitate toward extreme. It's either one extreme where you're hating on men and the other extreme where you're demeaning women. You see? But Islam is not on either extremes. You'll never find any Islamic teaching on opposite extreme. But that's what psychological rigidity does. And actually, I find that people on opposite extremes, even in these ideologies, are driven by psychological wounding. If they're getting to a point where they're hating on men and the only way that women are empowered is if they're above men and they're putting down men, they're driven by psychological wounding. So the ego goes to the opposite extreme. This is the only way we feel safe is we're putting down men. But the opposite is true too. If you're part of the red pill movement, you're driven by psychological wounding too, because you feel the only way for you to be safe is if I demean women, if I create such rigidity in my approach. It's really an ego-driven approach. So always know this as a rule for yourself. If you find yourself going on any extreme, it is driven by the ego. It is driven by psychological wounding, emotional wounding that you have not processed. And you need to find balance, because Islam has everything to do with tawazun. It has everything to do with balance. But back to control, there are many things we are not in control of. And if you burden your mind to try to control things, you will struggle spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. So people try to control, and there's so many things that people try to control today. And I see this a lot in relationships more. If I can control what others say, if I can control what others do, if I can control their reaction. People don't even realize a lot of times that they're trying to control people's reactions. They're constantly scanning and monitoring other people's impression of them. So they're trying to change their impression of them. You can't control people's perception of you, by the way. I know you know it up here, but you have to know it here. And you have to really believe it, because everyone in your life, even your closest people, have a different perception of you, subhanAllah. Because it has to do with their own lens and their own heart and their own mind and their own psychology and their own makeup and their own upbringing, right? So imagine you're trying, how much, imagine all the energy you're depleting trying to control something you really cannot. And ultimately, at the end of the day, people will still have their perception of you. So isn't it better to use that sacred energy Allah gave you for being your most authentic self that is pleasing to Him? Using it to actually maximize your potential instead of playing small to fit into the boxes that people want to place you in, or to please everyone, because you only have a limited amount of energy. You could use it to please Allah and make sure that's your highest concern, or you could use it in people pleasing, to monitor something and to control something that you really ultimately cannot. And I know right here, you might understand this rationally, but you can only understand this through experience and through acting upon it. It's in those moments where you're so worried and the anxiety comes up and you're worried that someone might have a wrong perception of you, and you don't over-explain yourself. And you don't go into oversharing mode. And you don't go into that mode of like, wait, but this is not what I'm, that kind of like spiraling where you go into that mode. That's just one example of how you can start shifting to a place of like, I don't need to control this. It's not something I can even control. And I'm going to trust that Allah will take care of this person's heart. I'm going to trust that Allah will take care of how this person perceives me. Because ultimately, Allah's in control of that. I tell people this all the time when they go to interviews, and it helps them reduce their anxiety when they go to interviews, is understanding that Allah is in control of the heart that you're trying to, you think is the reason for your risk, is the source of your provision, is the source of you getting that job. And when you shift from a place of like, I need to control what this person, how this person perceives me, to I need to show up powerfully and authentically and truthfully and the best that I can do in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, while trusting that Allah is the source of my provision. Oh my God, the way they carry themselves in an interview even changes. It's not even about that person. That person's just sitting there. That person's just there interviewing them, and they understand and they have respect for that person, but they know the outcome is not up to that person. They know their risk is in the one who is the highest, the one who is in full control. And people attest to this. They've been to interviews where they're not qualified, let's say, for the position. SubhanAllah, Allah takes care of it for them in a way. So you can only know these things you can know them on one level here, but you truly know them through experience. It's in the moment that you choose to do something differently. And I always say this is where we take it from theory to practice. A lot of things feel good to hear in theory, but it's a whole different experience when you actually attempt to practice it. And it's okay if you feel anxious. It's okay if anxiety comes up. That's a sign that you're facing something you need to face. Not all anxiety is bad, by the way. This is like the way that people understand these days, that all anxiety is bad and I need to avoid it, is something that is harmful, that's being promoted on social media and in the Western self-help world. That all anxiety is not bad. Not all Western self-help, but a lot of it. Not all anxiety is bad. Some anxiety actually leads you to better changes. Some anxiety leads you to face your fears instead of being stuck in the same place. Some anxiety actually leads you to growth. And it causes you to move. It causes you to do something different. So we need to stop again having black and white approaches to everything, which is a sign of mental rigidity, right? Is that you have to label everything as all bad or all good. Even with people can be mentally rigid, even with the way they perceive people. That once someone does something, bad, they're all bad. Be careful of this. Catch yourself when you have these perceptions. Someone hurts you, already you're labeling them as all bad. Someone does something that displeases you, already labeling them as all bad. That's a sign of rigidity. That's where the ego goes to feel secure. The ego needs this person now to be a bad person so it can feel good about itself. And then what happens? And you want to backbite about this person because you want to reinforce the ego's image, right? You love when someone mentions that something bad about this person too, because then the ego is reinforced, right? When you're mad at someone, you love hearing someone else also be mad at them, right? You love hearing someone else say, oh yeah, that person hurt me too. And so it's always important to have muhasabah and check in. Why do I feel good about this right now? Why do I feel good about this thing or that thing? Why do I need to have this all or black or white thinking, or all or nothing thinking about someone, or about even your day? Mental rigidity, which is very much related, perfectionism, for example, is a sign of mental rigidity. And we went in depth into perfectionism before, right? So I hope it's fresh in your mind. But perfectionism has a lot to do with this all or nothing. In my home method, I call it a lower self-value. Perfectionism, many people think it's a higher self-value. It's not a higher self-value. It's actually a very lower self, ego-driven value. A higher self-value, a soul-aligned value that benefits your heart is excellence, ihsan, not perfectionism. It's that I'm always a work in progress. There's always something for me to learn. I have a setback. It's just about me coming back. You become more mentally flexible. Now, when something goes off in your routine, you don't throw away the whole routine. You don't give up on the whole routine. You say, how can I get back on track? This is actually one of the main common reasons a lot of people don't accomplish their goals, is because of perfectionism. It's because of this mental rigidity. They can only work towards their goal when everything is perfect. One thing is off, they throw it off. And then they think, I'm a perfectionist. And they think that's such a cool thing. You know, we say that, right, in our society. Oh, I'm such a perfectionist, you know. We could reframe that. No, you're just self-sabotaging ego. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. We don't have to say that. But you know what I mean? It's like when you break it down, you're like, oh, it's not really a good quality. Because also labeling bad qualities as good in your mind harms you. And so it's important to say, no, where is this really coming from? Because the heart understands that we walk towards Allah in all our conditions. So I think I've shared this before, but it's a new few months. So I'll share it again. One of the common thoughts in the home method is, if you lead from your mind, you will only walk towards Allah as what? And who's familiar with it so far? I've said it so many times. If you lead from your mind, you will only walk towards Allah as long as you want to. That's no. But that's the other one. I'm going to get to that one. As you know or comprehend Him. So if you lead with your mind, you're only going to walk towards Allah. So it's good that I repeat things, right? It's good, alhamdulillah. I always feel bad that I'm like repeating things, but it's good. If you lead, okay, I'm like getting track. Okay. If you lead with your mind, you will only walk towards Allah as long as you comprehend Him, as long as you understand. I know, I walk towards Allah. I understand His wisdom behind things, I walk towards Allah. I don't understand, I stop walking. And many people do this today because they worship their mind. People have stopped worshiping Allah because they don't understand certain things in the Quran, or they don't understand certain things in their deen. And then that's all they worship. They're like, well, I don't understand, so I stop walking. If you lead with your nafs, your lower self, your ego, or your emotions, you're going to walk towards Allah only when you feel good, which is what you were referenced. Only when you feel good. You feel motivated. I walk towards Allah, I feel good, I walk towards Allah. I feel motivated, I walk towards Allah. But if you lead with your heart, you walk towards Allah in all your conditions, understanding that He is the most perfect and I will always be imperfect. And once you set this as a framework of life for yourself, things start to get easier. You realize, I'm spending so much energy trying to be perfect rather than walking towards the most perfect. So if you walk towards your mind, you'll only walk towards Allah as long as you comprehend Him. If you lead with your nafs or your emotions, you'll only walk towards Allah as long as you feel good. And if you lead with your heart, you will walk towards Allah in all your conditions. Keep that as a rule for yourself. But there are many things we try to control. And you have to really assess what your illusions of control are. Some people's illusions of control have to do a lot with people. Another person's, you have to always understand, knowing yourself, the expression of man arafa nafsahu arafa rabbahu, whoever knows himself or knows herself knows his Lord. Whoever knows himself knows his Lord. Why? The more that you get to know yourself and your nafs, and everyone's psychological makeup is different. Your ego is attached to different things than her ego. Everybody's ego is attached to different things. For one person, doing ego work is about being more patient. For another person, their ego work is about being more proactive. Well, I mean, when you're patient, you are supposed to be proactive too, but so let me scratch that. For one person, ego work is slowing down. For another person, ego work is, no, you have to be more proactive, right? So everybody, subhanAllah, like, it's not one size fits all when you do this work. For example, one person, their ego work is about speaking less. For another person, their ego work is about speaking up more. It really depends what their ego is attached to. But you have to get to know yourself, because the more you know yourself, the more you know, like the more you get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the ego creates barriers between you and Allah. And shaitan will give you the illusion that you're working on yourself when you aren't. So you have to really assess what your illusions of control are. And it's really in those moments where you have a heightened sense of emotion, heightened sense of anxiety, distress, and there's no solution in front of you. And you, in those moments, that's when it's really powerful to say, what am I trying to control that I can't? Is it a person? This is really especially important for people who are parents. And they become really anxious with parenting their child, and they're trying to control all these things. Ultimately, they belong to Allah. They're His before they are yours. So that also helps so many parents. It's realizing, whoa, I'm acting like I'm their Lord, trying to control their future and all these things. I don't know what's going to be in store. My child is on their path with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like they are an separate human being, a separate soul than me. I don't own them. And that's really what assessing the illusions of control is like, what am I taking ownership for? That is not, it belongs to the one who has all ownership. Is it people? Is it their perception of you? Is it that I need to know everything? Is it perfectionism? I need to have everything lined up to the T. What happens to you when someone does something that goes outside of like what you think is perfect, for example? Do you panic? Do you say, no, we need to do it this way or that way? And you're not flexible. This is also what's happening to a lot of people. Their mental rigidity is making them inflexible with the people. It's okay. What if they do it a different way than you sometimes? A lot of people have a problem with that. No, it has to be this way. And so it really is about turning inward and paying attention to yourself in those moments of heightened anxiety because you're trying to control something that you can't. Allah's showing you. See, emotions are constantly sending us messages, but people don't pay attention to them. People go try to soothe them instead of actually learn from them. So instead of saying, what is this emotion teaching me? And what am I trying to control? It's that I can't. They go into, how can I soothe it? How can I escape it? How can I get rid of it? So for a lot of people, when you get anxiety because you're trying to control something that you can't, that Allah's making clear for you that you cannot control this, they go into a mode of, trying to control it more. Well, maybe I'll go do this. Maybe I'll go do that. And this really leads people into a lot of toxic traits. This is where manipulation comes from. If you think about manipulation, right? And let's go to the extreme example. Let's say a narcissist, right? Why is manipulation such a big trait of a narcissist? Now, you can engage in manipulative behavior and not be a narcissist, by the way, right? But you have to catch yourself. That's what really protects you from getting into that place, from it progressing into something more harmful where it becomes solidified in your personality. It's saying, hold on, wait a minute. I'm not being authentic in this moment. I'm trying to control something that I'm not. I'm trying to control the image. But for a narcissist, the reason manipulation is a big part is because they're trying to control people's perception of their self-image. Right? That's a big part of it. So I will manipulate to get people to still see me the way that I want them to see me. Not the way that I am, the way that I want them to see me. Yeah. So anytime you are, your mind gets into that rigidity, you're really going to get yourself into some toxic traits. And we all can have toxicity, by the way. Toxicity is not something that's just for like narcissists. People have this, assumption that only narcissists are toxic, or, no, we all can have toxic traits. The key is to assess your toxicity, to be honest with yourself, to make sure you're working on yourself, to not just succumb to them and surrender to them, to make sure that you're actively understanding that you'll always be a work in progress, and paying attention to what your emotions are trying to teach you in those moments. Emotions are messengers. that's what that's why I love the poem by Rumi, The Guest House, where he talks about, it's a long poem. I recommend you all check it out. I've read it before here, but I'll actually read it to you guys. I don't think I've read it recently. So Rumi, he wrote this poem called The Guest House, and he says, "This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond." This is really powerful if you are struggling, if you view, especially for people who are prone to resisting their emotions or fighting or denying or suppressing or just going against them instead of actually being friends with them, welcoming them. Because he says welcome them. What happens when think about, he says welcome them at the, like, think of it as like a guest house, and you're opening the door for this guest, right? And emotions are that guest. What happens when you are fighting a guest? You're trying so hard to push the door, you're trying so hard to keep something out, right? You're using a lot of energy to do that. And so he's giving you the example of, like, welcome. He says welcome them. So welcoming has a lot to do with surrender. This is what I feel. I can choose to use my energy to fight it, or I can choose to use my energy to learn from it and see what it has to offer me. As he says, be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So the way that, and I'll end with this, the way that you can become more flexible is learning to access your heart. So back to the home method, the way that you learn to lead from your heart is you start prioritizing this heart. The truths that it contains. Is the Quran your anchor? Because the heart can only lead if it's nourished properly. Are you prioritizing Allah's prescriptions for it? Because He gave you prescriptions for this heart. If you're neglecting the prescriptions of the heart, it cannot lead you. Just like any leader who's not nourished, who's not properly taken care of, cannot lead, right? So if you want your heart to lead, you have to be caring for it. You have to be prioritizing it. You have to make sure that it's aligned with the prescriptions that Allah, that its creator, its programmer gave for it to be healthy and functioning. But also, you have to also build that muscle of checking in with your heart. And when you feel like you're exhausting yourself mentally, you have to in the home method, I say that the heart is like the lighthouse and the mind can be like the ocean. For safety, what do people do? They go from the ocean to the lighthouse, right? As like a space of safety. And that's what you have to think of of your heart. It's a haven that Allah gave you. If you're burdened by the world, it's time to take a break. It's time to get out of the ocean and its waves and the relenting storms and come and get safety there. Recalibrate. Access its power. And it's light, because the lighthouse has light, right? So you have to access its light and the capabilities and the facets and the capacity that Allah subhanahu, and the potential that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it to guide you, to be your inner compass in this world. Just as if you think human beings can create a navigation system, how can you think that Allah would put you in this world? And if human beings can create a navigation system to help you just get from point A to Z in this world, how do you think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would put you in this world and put you on such a journey, such an important journey in this world, without giving you a superior navigation system? And that is your heart. And that is all the tools He gave you to navigate your way back to Him. The key, though, is us learning how to use these tools in a way that is aligned with the creator of the manual, with the creator of our programming, so that we don't go against the way it's designed to do, the way it's designed to be, and so that these tools don't experience malfunctioning, which is what happens to a lot of people. You will always experience malfunctioning when you disconnect from the owner of the manual that tells you how to use these tools, right? Okay. So we'll stop here for Aisha, inshallah. I don't want to delay too much. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Sami, can you turn off the live stream, please? Off? Okay, good.
أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله